Lutheran History podcast, where we cover over 500 years of Lutheran history. Today, we welcome back Professor Joel Otto to talk about the Synod's 175th anniversary and most of all, its history book called Christ Through Us. Professor Otto is the chairman of the anniversary committee. He's also a writer and contributor for this book. So, Professor Otto, thank you once again for joining us.
My privilege. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the first want to ask you more is your role of chairman, not so much as author, but why did the Synod choose to celebrate its 175th anniversary?
I'd say because it's just sort of the natural thing to do for congregations, but I'd say especially for bigger entities like like a church body, to kind of mark 25-year increments. I think it works. It's kind of about a generation, so I think it's good that each new generation you're reviewing and retelling the story of your church body, understanding to understand your identity, helps you appreciate how the Lord has brought us to where we are today, how his gospel has been brought to us, and how his gospel has been brought through on our synod and the blessings we have. I also think that when you look at the history of Lutheran church bodies in America, I think only, in my opinion, only the Missouri Synod really is older than us just by a few years, as far as being able to still trace your identity. There were Pennsylvania Ministerium goes back to 1748 and others, but they've kind of all been swallowed up in the mergers over the years and really don't have that same identity and that we can trace ours back to and that we have retained. And I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. So the need for the anniversary is there. At least there are plenty of benefits and opportunities to celebrate that. Looking at God's grace among his people over those generations. And I suppose if you want to say 25 years is about a generation, well, this is 7 generations already of Wisconsin Synod history, which is pretty amazing. So why then is the Synod anniversary now leading to this book, Christ Through Us? Why make a book? For whom is it intended?
I'd say the book is intended for just the general population of the Synod. We really have never produced a book like this that emphasizes that there's a lot of images in it. Scholarly, academic, like the Wisconsin Synod Lutherans, which John Brenner is revising and expanding, and will be coming out either this spring or summer as well. But we never really had a popular telling of the Synod's history like this. Again, that emphasized that really worked into the images and pictures and things like that. And so, kind of looking to just kind of provide a new resource like this that might help to expand the knowledge of our Synod's history among more people who might be drawn to a resource like this rather than a more scholarly treatment. And we wanted it a little bit bigger. They did a very small book back in the 150th anniversary. We wanted something a little more extensive than that. So it's kind of what the driving force is behind this.
Yeah, I do remember catechism class. It was probably a few years after the 150th, but our pastor used that smaller brown book, but it was nice. They had some pictures in it. It kind of got in and got out, told the story, but this is probably 3-4 times the size of that easily, as far as the content and number of pictures. And of course, you got a whole nother generation's worth of history that you're sharing as well. So what sort of things?
If I could ask one more thing, I would also say I think we were maybe inspired a little bit by what the ELS has produced in recent years with their anniversaries. They produced a very nice book on their Synod's history back in their 100th anniversary, and Galen Schmaling produced a very nice book on their seminary's history, very similar. And so I think that was a little bit of our inspiration too, to produce something like this for WELS.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had a podcast episode about that, about the time that book came out, maybe a little bit after. And yeah, I saw that too. And The pictures say 1,000 words, as they say, and at least for me, it really just a good picture kind of sucks you in and helps you relate to the people in it and their story, and maybe even imagine yourself in their shoes a bit better. So apart from having pictures, well, what sort of pictures are in the book? What does the book talk about? What does it show?
Well, it's telling the story of the synod. It's divided into 7 chapters, so not exactly 25-year increments, but at least kind of 7 key. You can kind of see 7 movements throughout. Um, I mean, it is just generally telling the story of the synod's history, but we have a lot of vignettes, short, 1 column vignettes that include a couple of images and then tell a little story about an interesting facet or person or event in the synod's history. Some of which are not ones that really have been told all that often, but hopefully kind of personal interest stories, um, more unique stories that are out there that we dug up and found and thought were worth telling. I mean, there's a general narrative throughout of the synod, the synod's history, and the title "Christ Through Us" was taken from the theme for the anniversary, but I think it also conveys that um, it has been the privilege of the Wisconsin Synod over the years, as God's grace has worked among us, that His grace has come to us through the message of Christ and the gospel, and that it has also gone out through us and to each generation and spread throughout the world. And so, what a privilege that we have that we've been able to do that. And so we've been trying to carry out that theme somewhat, that thread of that throughout the book. Maybe some places better than others, but that's kind of been what's been there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would definitely say having had the opportunity to look at the book, that definitely is there. But I think there's some other themes too about the importance of having called workers to publicly teach and proclaim the gospel. You see that as an early need, kind of a crisis, even in the first chapter or two, and that being addressed. And but yeah, I also like those little vignettes where you get to see the just regular people worshiping and sharing Jesus with their kids and the next generation, right? Each generation, each chapter kind of sets up the next chapter, and I think that's not only good for a book to be organized that way, but good for a church to think of itself that way, right? Each chapter of your history sets up the next one, and I think that came through in the book rather well. I guess the other thing too I might want to say is just kind of not that I'm here to review the book, but having looked at it, I think it's an excellent kind of coffee table book because each page or two has its own subheading or one of those vignettes. You don't have to sit and read it all in one setting. It's very easy to pick up and read a section or two and move on to something else. And I think that's another strength of this book.
We had that in mind too, even just from the size of the book. It's not your typical, doesn't have the feel of a textbook kind of thing or something like that. It's a little bit more of a squarish shape. So it had we had that kind of intent behind it too.
Yeah, and so you mentioned just briefly that this book does cover things that the previous more academic histories don't cover. Do you have any particular examples of what the Christ Through Us book gets into that may be unknown to even more widely read WELS history readers?
Sure, I think like we include one of the vignettes is an excerpt from, for example, Johannes Bading's sermon that he preached on the occasion of Abraham Lincoln's funeral. Churches across the nation in April 1865 were asked to hold worship services, and so his sermon ended up being translated into English and published in the Watertown paper, and so we have and then included in the St. Mark's Watertown church, one of their history books, and so we pulled a few excerpts from that for a vignette. Another vignette I think of is the story of the first woman graduate of Dr. Martin Luther College in the 1890s, Lillian Moore, or the first African American woman graduating from DMLC back, Ruth Smith, So we told a few of those we tried to incorporate a few of those stories too, that it isn't just about the pastors, um, but that there are other stories to tell. And so we tried to find some of those, including this, the beginning of LW, of Lutheran Women's Missionary Society, the first youth rally back in the 70s. So some of those stories we tried to make sure we looked for to incorporate as little vignettes as well.
Yeah. Are there any one of those stories or people or events that just kind of jump out and get you excited to to read about, or that's kind of one of your favorites, maybe?
Um, that's a good question. One of the ones I kind of liked was the story that I think John Brown was the one who really founded the story of professors Hirsch and Moldenhauer going up to Canada to get the pipe organ that they eventually put into Martin Luther Preparatory School Chapel in Prairie du Chien.
Hmm.
That these guys they got their license to be able to drive a semi truck. They rent somebody from New Ulm. I think it was a member one of the churches in New Ulm let them use this semi. They drove up during their Easter break up to Canada to get this pipe organ that had been disassembled and brought it back down and then reassembled it and did what necessary repairs and such. And then eventually it was put into the chapel at Prairie du Chien. And just kind of a cool story to hear the dedication of those two men and going out of their way to do that. To serve the musical needs of a prep school.
Yeah, and that's kind of when you talk about people a lot doing God's work, you see a lot of people serving other people. Maybe it's kind of the through us part of the book. You see a lot of that in there. Now, thanks for sharing that story. Now, I guess the other kind of related question is, as you and others were researching for this book, were any kind of new discoveries that you said, this actually adds to, or maybe even changes in some way, our own perception of our own synod, or at least adds something deeper to it?
That's a good question. We did uncover some, I'd say, newer photos that I had not seen before. Like one of Bodding in the pulpit of that St. John's Church. I think you were with us when we found that one.
Well, I was there for that. Yeah, I can sense the excitement in the room.
Although I later found out that I
came
think
out.
that was actually published in an old history book of St. John's, but wasn't very
Okay.
wasn't very good quality. So the one we got was better quality, but I think just and this goes to some of the research I've done for other projects. Just our synod there was a lot of different stuff going on, particularly when you get into the 50s and 60s and 70s. I think I've been digging around in Oscar Naumann's collection for another research project I'm working on, and I just am floored sometimes by all the different things he had to juggle. And our synod in general was doing that. You've got trying to do you're trying to do overseas mission work for the first time. You're trying to do expanded home mission work to other parts of the country we've never gone to. You're trying to expand and almost rebuild several of our campuses because we need the facilities if we're going to have the workers that we need, and then that same kind of thing is being repeated on local congregations where they're doing building projects or expanding schools, and you start area Lutheran high schools in the 50s, and then you're on top of all that, you got all the tension with the break with Missouri, and it just kind of how the Lord allowed us to navigate through all that and provided us with leaders to be able to do that. And I think I grew, maybe if nothing else, in my appreciation for the leaders that God has raised up among us over the centuries or over the decades in our synod's history. Maybe that's the thing that struck me more than anything else.
Yeah, I think
That's
that's well
a
put.
new narrative or anything, but I just think there's some of the leaders that the Lord has provided were true blessings.
Yeah, and to have a new history doesn't mean you have to upend the the narrative or the story we've always been telling, right? Sometimes it just confirms and strengthens some of those things, and deepens our appreciation for it while we uncover other, or you in this case uncover additional things that could be said. And I think that's another strength of this book too. I forgot who I was reading, but another church historian said, well, just as nations often tell their stories about through the stories of battles and wars as kind of being the major turning events, the church sometimes gets a reputation for just talking about its controversies and its issues. And in a way, sometimes even a WELS history can sound like just a list of issues and confrontations. And no doubt those are there, and that can sharpen our commitment to God's word. But at the other side, this book also covers so much of the positive work and projects and people and developments that took place over the last 175 years too. So I think that's another strength of the book. It's not just a list of controversies as sometimes church history could appear to be.
And I'll say we try. I mean, we were conscious also, not trying to come off as Wells triumphalism or anything like that,
Mhm.
because and there were certain times where we even said in the book that, yeah, this didn't probably go the way it should have gone. The decisions were made here that weren't the best. I mean, you do that with, and you have to tell that with the Protestant controversy, for example. But we didn't, in some history books of Wells, that gets a whole chapter. Well, we didn't devote a whole chapter to the Protestant controversy, but we still told the story, because it had an impact on the synod and what the synod ended up doing, and the losses that we endured and the mistakes that were made. And you acknowledge those, and we're flawed, sinful human beings, but God uses us anyway, and what a privilege that He does. And so we tried to bring that out anyway in the book as well.
Yeah, and that being said, I think this is so you cover it, and I think it's a good summary of, say, for example, the Protestant controversy. It's a good launch pad, right? This is a good primer level, entry level history book for anyone, right? What's our story? We'll get into it. Well, maybe you really, for some reason, have a reason to get into the Protestant controversy. We'll go to those other books, those other chapters, or
Mm-hmm.
if you're gifted enough, research and write a whole another book yourself, right?
Yeah.
That could be done. So, yeah. Well, I think maybe another question I want to ask you too is, in what ways was this book a group effort? I think that's reflected in the variety of things that are put into it.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, it just starts out from the authorship side. It's very much, and John Brown and I co-authored it. We kind of flip-flop back and forth with chapters, although we each contributed, particularly the vignette side of things, to each other's chapters. So the reader might notice a little change, some differences in writing styles. But our editor from Northwestern Publishing House, I think, did a nice job of trying to smooth some of that out. We had our archivist, Susan Willems, and I did a lot of the work on photo selection, but we had a lot of people throughout the synod, yourself included, submit a lot of photos. We had asked for photo submissions. We had set up a way to do that and a way to gather them and collect them. And so we try to incorporate wherever possible photos that people had submitted. Now we couldn't include all of them, of course, but we did. We were conscious in trying to make sure that we included a number of the photos that people had submitted. We had a designer and a design team. We had somebody who did editing of the photos. Paul Burmeister was kind of the overall coordinator, I guess you could say, of the design work. So it's very much a collaborative team effort with a number of people giving contributions in a number of different ways. And so it's been kind of fun to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was in no way a major contributor to this at all, but every time, once in a while I see a picture that I pulled out of Grandpa's basement and it's in there. I was, oh, that's pretty neat. I had no idea what would get in, and it's the kind of the story of Christ through us, right? It's a synod of people together, and I think that's another strength of the book. You just get a variety of photos from all over. So, well, good. Well, I think as we wrap up today, let's plug the book here a little bit. Kind of a shameless plug. Why should everyone listening to the podcast right now get this book, whether they're a WELS member or not?
I just think it's an interesting way of seeing God's grace at work in one corner of his church over the course of, like you said, 7 generations. Uh, and it's hopefully told in a way that is understandable by the vast majority of people who would be reading it. Our hope is that maybe it would spark some interest among teachers to teach some use this and some of the timeline an interactive timeline that's being prepared that will be on the Historical Institute website that can maybe help teachers teach the Synod history to their students, whether it's in our Lutheran high schools or grade schools or catechism classes. Maybe an impetus for pastors to do some work on WELS history with their Bible classes. So I think that's kind of what we were hoping for with this, that it would have a wider readership among the members of our synod and spark an interest and inspire encouragement for today's ministry, as well as people see the challenges that people went through in the past and that God worked in his grace and power to help them overcome. That can be serve as encouragement for today too.
All right. Well, very well said. Well, thank you, Professor Otto, for sharing a bit about the contents and the story behind the book, Christ Through Us. And of course, we encourage people to get a copy as soon as possible. They're planning on being released in early summer of 2025. Thank you for your time today.
You're welcome.